I am so thrilled to be here among this small group of the brightest, best, most inspiring women, because y'all know that's who shows up to the pre-party, right? The brightest, the best, the most passionate. Give yourself a round of applause. You got up earlier. So I'm Deirdre Sullivan, and I'm honored to be the president of the United Way of Larimer County. We have an incredible early reception panel time with our good friends from the Women's Foundation of Colorado who inspire me every day, talking about the landscape for early childhood education and what's happening in Colorado, here in Larimer County, and even in a local early childhood provider that I'm a little biased about being my favorite, because we'll learn more about that in a while, but that's where I came from before I was in the seat at United Way. I was the executive director of a local early childhood family resource center, and honored to have somebody near and dear to me who stepped into that role as one of our panelists today as well. So United Way and WomenGive have supported the Women's Foundation of Colorado over the past 17 years with more than $650,000 of investment in work across our state. A priority of the charter members of WomenGive was to address both the need to address the immediate needs and barriers to education through child care scholarships, and also understanding the power of partnerships to impact systems change at the state level. And that's what we've been supporting our friends at the Women's Foundation of Colorado to do and to lead. Their advocacy efforts, research projects like Economic Realities of Investing in Women, that was done in 2020, gifts, and then gifts to the Women and Girls of Color Fund that we're watching closely and monitoring and seeing how do we do more of that kind of work. So they're so inspiring. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all here, and also to introduce my colleague, co-change maker, and someone who inspires me, Louise Meyerland, who's the Vice President of Programs at the Women's Foundation of Colorado. Please welcome her.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Deirdre. And thank you all for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. I am Louise Meyerland, Vice President of Programs at the Women's Foundation of Colorado. And thank you all for being here this morning to support WomenGive. It's my honor to share more with you this morning about the Women's Foundation's long-standing partnership with WomenGive to make high-quality, affordable childcare more accessible for families in northern Colorado and across our state through policy change. Thank you, WomenGive members, for trusting the Women's Foundation of Colorado as your public policy partner to expand the scale and accelerate the pace of your impact in the community. And thank you for the opportunity to share more about this exciting work today. I'll share a brief high-level picture of the opportunities ahead and some background on all we've accomplished together in our partnership over, my goodness, the decades. And then we'll hear more from an expert panel that includes my colleague at the Women's Foundation of Colorado and our partners in policy change at the state and local level. With WomenGive's partnership and investment, the Women's Foundation of Colorado advances systems-level changes that promote gender, racial, and economic equity. Improving access to high-quality childcare is a top priority for us. And through our long-term partnership, we've made significant progress, including policies that ensure state childcare subsidies support parents while they are pursuing education and growing their incomes to more fully support their families, to provide income tax credits to early childhood educators, parents who have childcare expenses to pay, and for those who make donations to childcare providers. Policies to fund full-day kindergarten and universal preschool, and support local communities in developing local childcare solutions. As members of WomenGive, your investments have contributed to the successful passage of several statewide policy changes just in the last legislative session that provide such better support for women and families. These include establishing the new State Department of Early Childhood and formalizing the plan for a universal preschool program that will benefit 63,000 children across Colorado. This is a significant step that will make it easier for women to enter, remain, and succeed in the workforce. And it also elevated childcare and early education to a cabinet-level position in our state. This is strategy we're invested in, change we believe in, and we're helping to build so that it works for the whole of Colorado and right here in Northern Colorado. We have also been celebrating the success of a 4-year early childhood educator income tax credit, which strengthens the quality of childcare and helps retain the early childhood workforce by rewarding educators for advancing their credentials with a refundable tax credit of up to $1,500. The long-term stability of our childcare and early education system hinges on the sustainability of the workforce providing that care. This measure has a significant economic impact in the near term for our early childhood educators, while our state continues to work on longer-term strategies to stabilize and grow compensation for all who practice in the field. We've also celebrated the progress of a tax exemption for property owners that lease space to nonprofit child care centers. It helps the providers keep their operating costs low, which helps them offer more affordable care for families. Also, we helped to pass a 10% increase in the monthly cash allowance for Colorado Works, our state's temporary assistance for needy families program, and a cost of living increase with it every year thereafter. This helps to keep up with the growing costs of making ends meet for families here in Colorado. Another contributor to helping to make ends meet is our passage of the Don't Tax Dignity bill, which acknowledges that period products, diapers, and incontinence supplies are absolutely essential products, and we eliminated state sales tax on them. Families spend more than $1,000 a year to keep a child under 3 in diapers. And a small savings with a state sales tax exemption can make a huge difference for families who are struggling to meet these costs. Now, while we are celebrating all of this tremendous progress and more, WomenGive and the Women's Foundation share a commitment to continuing to improve our statewide early childhood education and care program so that women of every background and identity and their families can thrive. We remain focused on the opportunities ahead. In this legislative session that just started last month, we are advocating for several additional policies to support women and families. We are working to expand the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit to ensure working families have more of the money they need to meet their families' needs. We're working to reauthorize the Child Care Contribution Tax Credit to incentivize continued investments in our early care and education system, to support equitable implementation of Colorado's paid family and medical leave system to ensure that families don't have to choose between providing for their families and caring for them. We're promoting fairness and pay transparency to ensure equal pay for equal work so that working families have the pay they need to cover their needs, and to ensure longer periods of continuous Medicaid coverage for young children to ensure consistent access to affordable health care. These policy changes will transform opportunities for women and their families and their whole lives and futures. The impact of policy change extends to all 2.85 million women in Colorado, and we know we can't do this work alone. Thank you so much, WomenGive, for investing in systems change through our partnership, and thank you all for supporting WomenGive and the women and families here in Northern Colorado and throughout the state. I hope you'll join us in this exciting work as we continue to forge ahead. Please plan on joining the Women's Foundation and WomenGive on April 6th for our next Advocating for Impact advocacy training series. Together, we can promote equitable opportunities so all women and families can thrive. I hope you'll join us. Thank you so much.
Okay, truth be told, I want to be sitting in those Mad Hatter chairs down on the floor with all of our feet up on chairs. Thank you, Louise. We so appreciate all that you and the Women's Foundation are doing, and to be a small part of some pretty significant change making. And thanks to all of you who have been part of that work as well. I am excited now, as I mentioned, to bring some incredible panelists up to the stage who are going to share their perspectives with us. We have Allison Friedman Phillips, who is the Director of Programs from the Women's Foundation of Colorado, colleague of Louise. You can all come on up, Mike. Christina Taylor, who is the Chief Executive Office of the Chief Executive Officer of the Early Childhood Council of Larimer County. That's an alliteration. And Gloria Catt, who is the Executive Director at the Family Center La Familia, an early childhood family resource. We are thrilled to have these brilliant women joining us and just sharing from their perspective. We were strategic in selecting these three to really reflect the state perspective at a high level, local county perspective at what's happening around us in Larimer County, and then down to that granular level where Gloria sees the parents dropping their kids off, the kids and their teachers, and has that center perspective on the work. So United Way has been really leaning in this space, and I think part of that is because our community's identified this issue as a top priority, our state has. It's also a testament to impacted leadership. And having someone who's a former early childhood director in the seat at United Way who has that perspective has allowed us to respond and shift. And we've launched the Larimer Child Care Fund in partnership with the Early Childhood Council, distributing several $100,000 of scholarships to families to take wherever they want to go in Larimer County. We've been a proud endorser of a recent ballot initiative in Estes Park to raise a lodging tax to support housing and childcare in the Estes community that's really facing a crisis in this space. And so we are, we're leaning in. That's the best way I can describe it. And we're honored to be leaning in with these incredible three people. So I'm going to join them at the seat. I don't like being, maybe it's because I'm 5'2", being taller than people. It just doesn't feel good to me. It's my normal to sit, and these are such good friends that I feel like we should be sitting around a living room together. So if you all would be willing to just introduce yourselves, share a little bit about you, your work, and the role your organization plays in the childcare space, that'd be awesome.
Okay, hi there. Christina Taylor, CEO of the Early Childhood Council of Larimer County. For those that don't know, the Early Childhood Council has been serving our community for more than 20 years. We have a mission to bring together knowledge, resources, all of the things to ensure that children and their families in Larimer County thrive. We are one of 35 now early childhood councils in the state that have been established through state statute to provide this support to our community. I'm proud to say that we're one of the strongest councils in the state. We work very hard to be a leader in this space, to create innovative solutions that support long-term systemic change for our community. We also recently became the state-designated local coordinating organization for universal preschool, which means that my organization and my incredible team, who unfortunately couldn't be here because of UPK, are working to administer and roll out universal preschool in our community. So very proud of that role in the agency as well. Nice to be here.
Hi
Everyone, good morning. It's so nice to be here with you in person. I was saying that in 2020, this was one of the last big events I did before COVID, so it's kind of an amazing feeling to be back in this room and in this space and getting to talk about something that's so important for our state. My name is Allison Freeman Phillips, and I'm the Director of Programs at the Women's Foundation of Colorado. And Louise shared a lot about our partnership and what we do when she spoke earlier. So I'll just sort of add in, my perspective on why the Women's Foundation is so committed towards early care and education and childcare, and in particular, the workforce of the sector. I think I always try to say it's kind of like a triple bottom line. Because not only do we know that childcare and early childhood education are so important for children and families in terms of their long-term economic stability and being able to achieve later in life, but also, we know that so many members of the workforce are women. It's predominantly women and predominantly women of color, so it's an important workforce to care about in ECE, and also it's really good for our communities. We know when families want to send their kids to childcare and ECE, it's something that helps all of us be able to be at work and have strong and thriving communities. I'm also a first-time mom of a 4-month-old, so I'm in the thick of knowing how important it is to have affordable, trusted, high-quality care, and what that means for me to be able to go back to work and know that Dahlia is being taken care of.
4 months. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Gloria Cat. I am the Executive Director of the Family Center of Familia here in Fort Collins. So first, before I start, I would like for all of us to acknowledge the pain and losses that many women face every day worldwide due to crime and violence. Please join me just reflecting on that because we celebrate successes, but there's also a lot of violence going on around the world and even here in the U.S. So yeah, thank you for doing that. So I'm going to say that the Family Center has been serving the Northern Colorado community for 27 years now. We are a well-established family resource center here in Northern Colorado, and the main population that we serve through our family support services are the Latinx community, Latinos, Latinas, however you want to call the population, is mainly monolingual Spanish-speaking families that we're serving through the center. So childcare or early care and education is just one of the components on how we support families here in Northern Colorado. When we talk about family support, everything comes with it. It's economic development, it's the workforce that you just mentioned, and it's farm education and childcare. So we've been key in making sure that the population is served through our programs.
Thank you. And Allison, thank you for pointing out the fact that we're here in person and what a gift that is. How many times have you and I met each other and I've never seen you except more than on a screen? In fact, I didn't even know you were pregnant because I've never seen your whole person. So, congrats. What a world we live in. And thank you, Gloria, for acknowledging that while we do and are celebrating a lot of successes today, that there is still much to be done to improve the lives of women and children across the globe and here in our community. We're going to start, speaking of that, at the state level and have Allison share a little bit, a lot of childcare challenges and solutions are tied to what's happening at the state. And we got to hear from Louise a high-level picture of what you all have been working on and some of the successes. But tell us a little bit more about the creation of the Colorado Department of Early Childhood at the state level. What will we gain from it? What is the intent and the goals of that department?
It is a really exciting time in our state when it comes to early childhood and childcare. So just briefly, I think it's important to sort of look back about 10 years to kind of understand what got us to today. So when Governor Hickenlooper was in office, his administration created the Office of Early Childhood, and that was in the Colorado Department of Human Services. And he was always a big supporter of early childhood and a two-generation approach to providing services to families and children. And then when Governor Polis was elected in 2018 for his first term, that really ushered in a new era of, an elected official's overt commitment to early childhood. It was something that he ran on. It was really important to him that immediately we start paying attention to those early years and making sure that our state is committed to them. So we're really, really grateful for him for valuing that, because I think there's incredible work happening across the state, in communities from partners and of all different types, but I think being able to have, our highest elected official at the state level be so committed has allowed for so much of this to happen. And so then in 2019, his first legislative session, we passed full-day kindergarten, so every school district in the state can offer it and have funding from it if they weren't doing so already, to offer to their families and communities. And then in 2020, we as voters passed Proposition EE, and that was to fund universal pre-K, which I know we'll talk a lot more about. It was already mentioned by Christine in the beginning. And that tax will create around $200 million to fund UPK, and the taxes on nicotine, tobacco, and vaping products. And then, after all of that, in 2022, after several huge bills, for example, one was 500 pages long, there was a bill to create the Colorado Department of Early Childhood, or CDEC, as it's called, is a biz. So you might hear that thrown around today. And also create the universal preschool program that we'll talk more about. And so the reason it is a really big deal is because our Constitution limits the number of state departments that we can have. And this actually was the final allowable state department that we could have that's focused explicitly on early childhood. And what that does is it creates a cabinet level position, so the person who runs the Department of Early Childhood, Dr. Lisa Roy, she actually sits at the cabinet level with Governor Polis, and every week when he has his meetings with all of his cabinet members, she's there, being able to talk about early childhood in that way. And so I think that that's really important to note, that we now have this specific government department that is focusing on this issue. And that being said, I'm sure many of you in your professional career have experienced, just creating a business or being at a new job, and it's a really big deal to stand up an entire department. And so they're hiring almost 300 people. They have about 200 people hired right now. Not only are they creating a new department, but they also are creating an entire new program for universal pre-K that I know we'll talk more about in a bit. But I think in terms of the questions Deirdre was asking, it's really an exciting time for our state that we have, we're joining, I think, only a handful of other states to have that explicit focus at the state level. And we also can't stop here. We have to continue investments at the federal, state, and local level to support ECE, because now we have this administration of all of the different programs that are supporting, whether it's like Head Start, UPK, mental health. There's so many different programs that are now in that department. We have to make sure we continue, as a community and as a state, to prioritize funding and just sort of general goodwill towards the importance of it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. There's a bonus for anybody who can write a rap between now and the luncheon using UPK. What was the other acronym? CDEC. Just kidding. So grateful, because most of us who are passionate about the work happening at the state level don't have time or the know-how to read 500-page legislations, and that's why we're so grateful that you geek out on it and tell us the basic dialed-down version of what we need to do. So super grateful. Let's take it to the local level. Christina, and talk to us about what's the landscape here? What are the costs that parents are paying, availability, what's happening with the workforce, and any of the solutions that are coming about?
super small question, so absolutely, let me just break that down. All right, so in terms of the landscape of early childhood, as Allison mentioned, kind of navigating this in her space with a 4-month-old, it's incredibly challenging. There continues to be a significant gap in the number of childcare spots that are available versus how many children actually need care. So the last deep dive estimate we did, we were short about 64%. Sorry, we had about 64% of the needed slots for preschool children, so that's 3 and up. And we had only about 25% of the available slots needed for infants and toddlers. So that's thousands of children in our community who have both parents in the workforce who do not have access to high-quality licensed childcare. This is due to a variety of factors. One would be the cost. The average cost of care in Larimer County is between $200 and $324 a week for one child, which equals roughly $9,500 to $15,000 a year for one child. That means the average family in Larimer County, say a median household income of about $75,000, which is currently our median household income, a family spends between 12 and 20% of their annual income on one child alone. So if they have more than one child, which many do, you're spending significantly more than that. Low-income families are spending up to 40% of their annual income on childcare costs alone, which, as you can imagine, impacts their ability to find sustainable housing, to put food on the table, to meet other basic needs because they have to work and they have to get their children in childcare. So that's the cost of families piece. I get a question a lot from individuals, why is this a system that costs so much? And it's because, there's a lot of regulations in place to protect the safety and well-being of children. And those regulations and the ongoing trainings and the environmental factors that have to be taken into account, the ratio of teacher to children in a classroom, really impact the cost of care in a big way. And the other big piece of why we don't have enough is that there are not enough educators in the community. The average early childhood educator, who often has a bachelor's degree in early childhood development, sometimes master's degree or higher, is making between $13 and $15 an hour. I saw an advertisement recently for folks that are stocking shelves at Walmart. They are hiring for $19 an hour. So one of the catchphrases that our communications gal created was, in what world does it make sense for someone that's handling canned goods to make more money than somebody that's raising our children in a child care center? And a lot of people ask the question, well, why the heck do they make so little if child care is so expensive? And that's because we've reached this critical breaking point. If providers, centers, or even family child care providers were to raise their rates and therefore be able to pay themselves or their staff more money, that cost gets passed on to families. And as I just illustrated, there's no way in heck most families can afford it now. It's often more than a mortgage for one child. So we often refer to childcare as a classic market failure, in that without public intervention, without additional public funding, there's no way to fix the system, because we can't charge families more to be able to pay educators more to fix the access gap that we currently have. In terms of local solutions, we've got a few. Deirdre mentioned earlier in this conversation the Larimer Child Care Fund, which was launched last year in partnership with the Early Childhood Council and a platform that we run called the Larimer Child Care Connect. That money went really, really fast. I think we distributed just under $500,000, and it was gone in a month to families that didn't qualify for CCAP. So CCAP is the Child Care Assistance Program, which covers a certain percentage or all of child care depending on income. The Larimer Child Care Fund was really designed to meet those families that were just above the CCAP cutoff, but still couldn't afford it. And it ran out in a month. We've done some pretty significant data dives into what the gap in costs in Larimer County is. And with all of the public investment that exists, including now the money that's being invested via UPK, Universal Preschool, we still have a gap in funding of $52 million for Larimer County. So what's covered by public funding versus the cost and how many children we have? It's a $52 million gap.
Is that keeping wages at the current? Or?
Correct. That is at current wage levels. So that's not raising the rates of providers in the community and therefore retaining them. Other innovative solutions, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the policy solutions that we're aiming for in our community, but I will say that the council's done some pretty extensive work in developing workforce recruitment and retention strategies that will help keep educators in the field. Because it's a high-pressure, high-stress environment where you're, dealing with children with challenging behaviors, you're managing a classroom of 10 children, most all are toddlers. And so I think we're coming up with some solutions that will help in the short term, but we do know that additional public funding is absolutely crucial to make a true impact in this system. Is there any part of that question I missed?
No, you painted a real nice picture, or not so nice, thanks. But it's reality. And
Glad we have a room full of people here talking about it. Speaking of reality, let's move to Gloria. You're the executive director at one of our community's nonprofit childcare providers, and I know all too well how much effort and energy you spend trying to raise funds and support families. And I think, one of the things we recently heard a presentation, our board of directors, is from all 3 of our school districts about the data in children in their readiness for kindergarten. And the disparities that exist, particularly in communities of color and children of color, our largest demographic of which is Latinx identifying. So, Gloria, first of all, huge gratitude to you and your team and the work you're doing. What does the work look like? Talk to us about a day in the life of La Familia and some of the challenges and other exciting things that are happening.
Yes, thank you so much, DJ. So you just mentioned, funding is always a challenge. Sometimes it's very frustrating, when you know that you're doing what you're doing, providing care for so many families. And every time, we need to renew our application for funding, and I have mentioned this to you before, we need to tell the city or the state that we are an early care and education provider. How else do you want me to put it in the narrative? This is what I do every year for 27 years. This is what I've been doing. And every time you send me this huge form, paperwork, attachments, I stayed up late last night because I was trying to submit an application for the state. And it was like so confusing. There was not a checklist. I'm like, okay, I'm so tired. I'm just going to send what I have, just to tell people we are a child care provider. So it's very frustrating. I wish that we could just attach a budget and just have agreements, like long-term agreements, 5, 10 years, whatever, and then just really do what we know. But anyways, with the UPK, it has been a learning process. We couldn't do any of this without the support of the council, so I'm really grateful for Christina and her team. They've been amazing, explaining things to us, because all we can do as a provider is make sure that families are supported. That they are a priority. All the bureaucracy that happens in the background, that's seamless to them. They don't need to know that, because we know that they need care and they need to develop their own goals. They want to secure their employment, whatever they're doing, right? I used to be a mom at the family center when I was working at United Way. This is just a little bit of my background, and I am so happy to see a lot of the faces here that they used to be my co-workers. I'm really grateful. Yeah, I love you guys. But I was a mom, and I understand all the struggles of me as a mom trying to keep a job, trying to run a house, and having La Familia to me was just like, wow, this is just amazing. And now that I have the opportunity to be on the other side, it is so expensive to run a center. The amount of money that needs to go into resources, employment, everything, is just a lot. So really, we don't have much room to increase wages because we would need to raise $1 million for us to support our staff. I don't have the capacity to raise $1 million every year. And where's that support coming from? You know, it's just a little bit here, a little bit there, you know, foundations. I'm so grateful for the foundations and all the money that comes into our center, you know, it's just amazing. And yes, we do fundraising events, and we have Analia, our new development director, who has been amazing, connecting with donors and really putting the word out there of the work that we're doing. And I think in terms of workforce, because you mentioned that before, we struggle, we cannot find teachers, qualified teachers is a big need. And I just want you to acknowledge that within the population that we serve, most of them, you know, migrant, Hispanic, Latinos, there is an informal network of care that happens between them that we need to acknowledge that not everything goes to a provider, not everything goes to a formal home-based system. There's these informal networks, and it's just amazing to see how the women in the community, they get organized. They have these WhatsApp groups where they keep adding more and more and more. I am in 2 of those WhatsApp groups with my personal number, because that's the only way you can do in WhatsApp. So I see everything that is happening there, from selling food, childcare needs, housing needs, everything. And so me, that's just the best way to understand what is trending in the community. And it's just like across from where we are in Fort Collins, there's a mobile home park. So I'm gonna go back in terms of workforce. Yes, we are struggling. We have a job posting that is permanently on our website. Why? Because if we wanted to support UPK and we want to open a classroom that had been closed because of the pandemic, we need to hire at least 3 or 4 qualified teachers, and we cannot find them. So me, just thinking of how we do things at La Familia, that we're always culturally attuned to the community, to the language and everything. 65% of our staff are either bilingual or Spanish is our first language. It's my first language as well. So everything that we do and we deliver is thinking of that population that has the right to access programming in their own language. And so very free, right? We don't want barriers. So I want to share something really exciting. Last year, I was thinking, if we have these informal networks, if we have people that, you know, are trying to learn English, that their Spanish is their first language, why can they study in Spanish? So I reached out to Leah Murley with the Front Range Community College last year, and I said, you know, it's time for us to connect, because she had just taken over that position. And you know, me, with all the craziness that happens at the center that you know about, I said, it's time for us to connect. We did a virtual meeting, and I said, Leah, is it possible to teach the EC classes in Spanish? And she said, yes, we can. So we have put together a pilot program. I'm very hopeful that, you know, the Front Range is going to do an amazing job setting up a new platform, because it has to be compatible with Spanish language. We need to have a bilingual structure. We're already hiring for that. And we're going to be able to translate the first 2 courses, which is 101 and 103, which those are like the core ones, right? So we're in the process for developing that. La Familia is going to bring a lot of expertise under the cultural attunement portion of things, a little bit of funding for marketing outreach, you know, whatever we can do. But we also want to bring an evaluation component to that. And that way we can prove that this is a need, and that the Latino student population can continue engaging in education and securing a better workforce. And just think of the opportunities. We might not see the outcomes like in a very short term, but I'm thinking long term, once everything can be developed in their systems, this is going to be a milestone in our community, and I don't know, I think it's enhancing the workforce that we need.
Gloria, that makes me kind of want to end this panel on that note. Really, that's the point. Yeah. We're so grateful for you, and I think a huge testament to truly impacted leadership, and when people like Gloria are driving the ship at La Familia, the amazing things that happen. So I'm honored to have switched positions with you, and now being at United Way in your old seat. So just by show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the nuts and bolts? We've talked a lot about UPK, not a rap, but a program. How many of you are familiar with the details of UPK in Colorado? Like what it includes? Okay, great. I think it's important for us to understand the reality of what it is and what it's going to offer and do, but also some of the gaps that it will leave local communities and other programs to fill. So Allison, if you wouldn't mind kind of kicking this off from the perspective of the state of, what is UPK, what does it offer, what does it look like in local communities? That would be great.
Yes, I am happy to provide that overview, and stop me though if you want to jump in from a local perspective or if I go for too long, because it is, I mentioned earlier that Governor Polis is very passionate about early childhood education and childcare, and he also, he comes from the business world, so he comes into government and I think we can have a whole other panel about expectations of government and how things are implemented, but his expectation was that the Colorado Department of Early Childhood, or CDEC, and Universal Preschool or Pre-K were going to be passed by the voters in 2020 to be funded through Proposition EE. We would create the State Department the next year, and then by 2023, so the year we are in this fall, we will open universal preschool in our state. Which again, I know you all are you've all worked in different businesses. That's a big deal, especially with the expectation to serve 30,000 children in the first year, or in the first few years, depending on what demand is and supply. And we've heard from the folks, the leaders in your community about how big of a challenge it is to just operate single centers. And so to, at the state level, to work across our large state, our 64 different counties, our 20-some early childhood, 35 early childhood councils, and make all of that happen. It was a big undertaking to happen within 3 years. And the goal is that, 4-year-olds beginning in this fall 2023 will have 10 to 15 hours per week of tuition-free preschool. Some 3-year-olds will be eligible depending on
their different intersections of identity and life experience, and some 4-year-olds are eligible for up to 30 hours a week. And what that meant though was, lining up this new State Department, lining up this huge new program, getting providers and school districts and other entities that could potentially offer these slots for universal preschool ready, and then also creating the side for the families to be able to sign up. And that just opened earlier this month. And the last I read, the demand was much larger than they even expected, and almost 20,000 families have already signed up with the hope to have services this fall. And so it's a big goal and it's important, but it's also really hard to implement things like that. And I think you've heard from the folks here in your community who are doing that hard work on the ground. And I think I'll probably stop there because I think that kind of addressed the larger picture, but I don't know if there's anything else I can add about it. That's great, and I think maybe Gloria and Christina can talk about, if I'm a mom with a 4-year-old and I show up at La Familia for this beautiful new classroom with the 3 teachers you've successfully hired, and I work full-time, and I say, okay, well, but I need care from 7:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. What does that look like for you at the center? Or Christina, what are you working on for that issue?
Thanks for phrasing it like that. That's the biggest challenge that we've ran into, right? So as Allison outlined, universal preschool means between 10 and 30 hours of free, high-quality preschool for 4-year-olds. Now, most 4-year-olds will get that 15-hour bracket. Only those with some qualifying factors, as they say, life experience, dual language learners, things like that, are eligible for the 30 hours. So what's been really interesting as the Universal Preschool or UPK coordinator here at the state or at the local level is that families will come to us and be shocked that that's all they're getting. I think that universal preschool sounds incredible, and it is incredible, right? As you mentioned, 6 years ago, we didn't have full-day kindergarten for free. I remember my youngest daughter, we had to pay for her to have a full day of kindergarten. So we've come a long way, and I don't want to detract from that incredible progress. But as Deirdre mentioned, a family that comes in needing full-day care, so from 7:30 to 5:30, that's a 50-hour week at a center, and they're getting 10 to 15 hours of that covered. So that leaves a pretty significant gap, especially for low-income families that can't afford this cost to still be able to afford childcare. So the struggle at the local level has been managing expectations, helping our families understand that, yes, this is universal, but we might not have enough spots, but it only covers 10 to 15 hours for most of you, but your child is 5 now and is not eligible, all of those things, right? It's because it's for 4-year-olds before they turn 5 and are eligible for kindergarten, and as Allison mentioned, 3-year-olds with some qualifying factors. So again, huge positive step. Still, and as I mentioned in my financial projection, we're still short $52 million in funding to fully fund early childhood system. Do you have anything to add to that related to families coming to you?
No, I think you summarized it really well. I think in reality, for us, if we have the space available, we would rather have a full-time, child enrolled or part-time, because we cannot accommodate just the 10 or 15 hours that you said, because how are we gonna staff that, right? That's the first question. How are we gonna staff that? And even if the family goes for the 15 hours, subsidized by the state, by the UPK, if they need full care and they're still low income, we still need to provide a scholarship, or if they're eligible for CCAP, then we connect them to CCAP or the new, the fund that you set up. So there's still many unknowns, and even though, we're a provider, we're part of the whole initiative, the UPK is amazing, we still don't know many things in terms of how families are gonna find care, but knowing that we still need to have more providers, more options. And I don't know, Christina, if you want to talk about that mixed delivery, like the home-based, I think that's important for everybody to know. It's not just providers like La Familia or Teaching Tree. There are other systems in place that can also support the UPK.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that we missed a very important detail about universal preschool, which is that it's a mixed delivery system. And that means that a home-based provider, a center-based provider, or a school-based provider may offer universal preschool spots and receive that subsidy from the state to cover the cost. So that's an incredible part of this system, and definitely helps to spread out the availability of care across a wide variety of licensed child care programs. It also helps promote parent choice. It allows a parent to choose what feels best for them and their child. I can tell you that in Larimer County, in the first week of universal preschool, we had about 800 families sign up. We are now well above 1,000 and have just over 100 providers in Larimer County that are willing to offer UPK slots. So we're in the top couple of the local coordinating organizations for the state for uptake. Our community is ready. They need these spots. And now we are tasked with a very big job of, are we going to be able to match all of these families with a provider in our community?
Wow. So I think blending and braiding all of the different funding sources at the state level, the local level, local donors, like many of you that are being part of the solution with your philanthropic contributions. I want to kind of close out our questions with just talking about what can we all do. You know, each of us has many hats. Some are mothers and fathers in the room, some are business owners, some are donors. I think you all have mentioned, you know, what each of the organizations you represent are doing, and I've touched a little bit on United Way. I was, when Gloria was talking about being up late last night, once again, writing a narrative about how important her work as an early childhood provider is. I was happy that one of the first things we did at United Way when I started was we eliminated the competitive process for the nonprofit providers. They've proven to us for 27 or more years that their work is important. We have plenty of data. Why does Gloria have to jump through more hoops to write grants to United Way while we know very well? So that's just an example of some of the major shifts and changes that I think we've all committed to. We're really working differently together with, you know, the partnership between the Early Childhood Council and United Way, with the launch of the Larimer Child Care Fund, recognizing the different lanes that we all need to step into and occupy instead of trying to do it all. I think there's been some big shifts. So, you know, I think if each of you could close us out with kind of a charge for this group about ways that we can plug in from your vantage perspective, that'd be a great way to wrap it up, and then we'll turn it to you all to ask questions. So I'll start with you, Christina.
Absolutely, and thank you for teeing that question up. I think I've potentially alluded several times in this conversation to the need for additional public funding. With childcare truly being a classic market failure, it's something that we have to invest in. One of the efforts that the Early Childhood Council has been spearheading in partnership with United Way and many other organizations in the community has been a deep dive into the feasibility of public funding locally for early childhood. We pursued this pretty heavily in 2021 through public polling, through policy development, through work alongside our Board of County Commissioners to determine whether or not a ballot initiative, so a question referred to voters to raise sales taxes, would be viable in our community. And we learned in 2021 that it would be. Fast forward to now, and we are still taking up that charge. It is our hope, and it's very early in the process, but it is our hope that we will have a question put to voters in November that will ask that very question. So to raise a 0.25% sales tax, so that's 25 cents on any $100 purchase in Larimer County, to fund early care and education in Larimer County. So that would generate an estimated 19 to 21 million. If you remember, I said we have a gap of 52. That combined with parents paying, at this point, we're trying to cap it at 10% of their annual income. We believe we can meet a majority of the need with the tax initiative. The tax, if passed by our voters, would fund tuition supports for families to lower the cost of care for them. Like I said, to try and cap that at 10% of a family's annual income for as many children as they have. And it would also work to invest in recruitment and retention and wage subsidies for early care and education providers so that it becomes a more attractive profession. So this, of course, is not something that we decide. It's something that our voters will decide, but it's something that we at the Early Childhood Council are committed to putting in front of our voters, and we're currently working very hard to establish the necessary partnerships and find a feasible way to make this happen alongside of all of our municipal and county partners over the next year. So I think that's a really good way for our community to rally behind this issue that could potentially inject, like I said, 19 to 21 million into the local system to really alleviate that pressure on families and on providers. And it's 25 cents on a $100 purchase, so it's not something that is beating us up on our receipts at the grocery store. I mean, many of us pay more taxes if we go to Centera to go shopping. So,
And a big shout out to the folks who are leading these efforts in your communities, because they're not easy, but you all really will have the opportunity to be advocates and to push for something that's really going to help your community. And again, this would be a whole other panel, but we have this thing in Colorado called TABOR, our Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It was a statewide ballot initiative that was passed in the early 90s. I was about 6 years old. I've asked my parents if they voted for it. I don't think they did. But what it does is it really, we all vote. I hope you're all voting in every local and statewide and federal election when you have the opportunity. And we elect people into office who hopefully we trust or at least believe are going to make the decisions that are the best for our community. And in our state, those people who we put into office, who are experts in understanding policy and the issues facing Coloradans, they don't have the ability to raise taxes at the state level to fund things like early childhood care and education, public education, housing, transportation, all of these issues that we've talked about today that we know our community are facing so desperately and need to just be able to get by and survive. And so what that does is it really puts the onus on our local communities to pass local tax measures, like what Christina was just sharing about, to make sure that we can have that money, come from community to support community. And early childhood sales tax increases like this have been passed, throughout Colorado, Denver, Estes Park recently, and also in Summit County. And there are efforts actually in the Roaring Fork Valley and other parts of Colorado to do what Larimer County is hoping to do. And so when I think about what to task you all with, it's not only thinking about supporting that effort, whether it's by voting, talking to your elected official about it, talking to your neighbors, being in tune with the campaign. But it's also then, how do you being an advocate for early childhood in other ways too? It's getting to know your local elected officials, getting to know the folks who recommend or represent you down in Denver in the General Assembly, and talking to them and telling them that you care about this issue and that it's really, really important to you that they then translate that into their actions at the state capitol. And of course, you can talk to the folks, your senators and your congressional representatives as well. Because, another thing we haven't even talked about today is the need for continued federal investment in early childhood. There was some opportunities for that in this last year that did not come to fruition, unfortunately. But, this is something that we have to keep increasing support for at the federal level, so hopefully we can get more money to the states as well. So support the local tax initiative, make sure you vote, and make sure you talk to your elected officials about this issue. Oh my gosh, my colleagues are going, if I don't mention this, April 6th, we're having an Advocating for Impact training. The Women's Foundation of Colorado is, and we hope that you'll sign up for it and join us, and you can learn more about advocacy and how to connect to your elected officials.
I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead. As property owner, I'm aware of the amount of my property taxes that go to support the local school district. When are we going to include this in property taxes? When are we going to increase this fund? It's an important part of kids getting success in school. So when are we going to do that?
it's a great question. Unfortunately, public polling tells us that our community doesn't agree. They don't want to raise their property taxes. And I think that's because the cost of housing in our community is so high already, that so many of our property owners are like, I couldn't possibly afford any more. So while I couldn't agree more, right, that's what our taxes are for. It's to create opportunities for thriving for our children. I don't believe that a property tax will be viable for Larimer County based on what our voters have told us, But we do intend to check again through polling this year, so I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I definitely encourage you to really support what Christina and Alison just mentioned. Talk to your representatives, talk to your neighbors, your legislators. They're always open to listen to you. But one thing I wanted to highlight is that there's that resistance, right, to increasing, as long as we say increase taxes, everybody goes like, oh, but if you're a business owner, maybe you don't have children, that's okay. But if you're a business owner and you have parents working and that they rely on affordable childcare, try to support them, like listen to them. It's not their fault that they have children and they want a secure job. So really, talk to everybody and try to understand that this is a benefit for the entire community. It's not a benefit for providers or the council or United Way or anything like that. It's because we want a healthy community. And really without that option for parents or caregivers to continue their paths, I think there's going to be a huge crisis. So, but thank you everyone.
Gloria, I'm going to tag on to what Gloria said really quick, and then I swear you guys can ask questions. But I've got a little bit of data in front of me that helps back up what you just said, the idea that a tax to support early care and education in Larimer County benefits everybody. In Larimer County alone, we see about $100 million in lost earnings, productivity, and revenue based on childcare access issues alone. So absenteeism, having to take time off work, sick time, all of those things for our parents. $100 million. We see about $31 million of that is lost by employers alone here in Larimer County, which is an opportunity cost of over 900 jobs a year just for our community. So there's a lot of data to say this doesn't just impact parents, it impacts all of us. Not to mention the down the road, this is our future workforce, and if they're not getting quality care and education and the right environment to thrive, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot 20 years from now.
As we're all talking, I'm realizing you are a motivated, engaged group of people. And I don't look at that as us talking to the choir who already believe this. I look at this as talking to who can be the ambassadors for these changes, that every one of you in the room has an opportunity and the ability. One of the things that Louise mentioned that I want to call attention as the leader, one of the mission at United Way is to lead philanthropy in our community. And one of the ways we do that is through the Colorado Child Care Tax Credit. We raise a lot of money every year. That is, donors get an additional tax credit of 50% that funds the general operating grant that goes to Gloria and Teaching Tree and Thompson Valley Preschool and EVIX up in Estes Park. It's what's funding the Larimer Child Care Fund. And that tax sunsets in 2024, so the legislature is working on it right now. So if you are a donor that benefits from the Colorado Child Care Tax Credit, please reach out to Allison. I'm like, afterwards, who can they talk to? Because we need people making sure that the legislature hears from all perspectives, and donors are a huge perspective. The market failure Christina mentioned, the 52 million versus 20, guess who's gonna fill some of that gap? Philanthropy. So this is a blended and braided solution, and we need all of the supports like that. So I couldn't walk away without mentioning that. It's hopeful and promising that will be renewed, but it never hurts to hear from a diverse audience of folks. I mentioned a little bit just a different way of working, and one of the things I forgot to share that is exciting and another way you can be involved. So Gloria and Christina and I, our team at United Way, and all of the nonprofit early care and education centers, as well as the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club, have formed what we're affectionately calling the sandbox, which it's the metaphor of playing well together in the sandbox. And it's kind of a not one without all. How are we going to address all of the housing communities that are saying, well, we want to have childcare here? How are we going to respond to the municipal governments and the county wanting to provide employer-supported childcare? how are we going to work strategically to make sure that we have a 10-year vision of care where families can access it and affordable. So our first and exciting launch is that we've gone in together with the Boys and Girls Club about 2 miles from here to purchase a school that's attached to the Boys and Girls Club and turn it into an early childhood center. The Teaching Tree and Respite Care, we hope, will be the providers of care for kids 0 to 5. And then literally in the same building, the Boys and Girls Club will be caring for kids 6 to 18 plus, and it'll be the first community campus for the Sandbox group that really meets the needs. And there's a whole second floor that we're excited to embark on a really deep community engagement process to say, what do you want and need in this space of resilience for families? So we'll happy to share more about that if that interests you. We'll be raising about $2 million to renovate the early childhood side. So I don't think we've left you with an absence of ways that you can plug in. And with that, I'm going to be a mic passer for questions that you all have of the panelists. So, any questions? We had a good one, first one.
Thank you. So my question is for Christina. You talked about the tax where it's 0.25%, I think, and so it will be 25 cents on $100, and that would raise 19 to 21 million. I mean, it seems to me, and I know a lot of taxpayers will disagree, but why couldn't we double that or triple or quadruple? I mean, $1 on 100, that's pennies.
I wish we could. I think the
That would
ideal
solve
would
the
be
gap.
that we solve the entire gap in one fell swoop. I think, again, we're going to rely on public polling to see what's truly viable. As we did in 2021, we did a couple polls to see what our taxpayers and our voters were willing to vote yes on. And what was most attractive was a 0.25% sales tax. I think the benefit of a sales tax or sales and use tax in Larimer County is that we can't expect it to grow. So if we're able to pass it, that amount of revenue should grow over the years to continue meeting the gaps. So yes, I agree, it would be great if we could do more. And we'll certainly, just like you mentioned with property taxes, we'll certainly ask our voters again this year. But we want to be successful, so we're going to do what the voters want us to do. Yeah.
Looks like we have a
really appreciate your
campaign chair over here.
Right?
Yeah, Diane. You've talked about how the loss in productivity is costing real dollars to businesses and so on. What are your thoughts about how to better educate from small business to large business that fact, and then how they might help partner with offsetting some of the costs? Second part is, as you've talked about the low wages but the high cost of childcare, what are your thoughts about breaking those other costs down? Like, how much does it cost for infrastructure? How much does it cost for facilities? How much does it cost for regulations? What are the pinch points where some of those costs could be reduced by both business as well as government?
Love both of those questions. First one related to educating our employers, right? The council has a very strong relationship with our chambers of commerce and with the executives partnering to invest in childhood, which is based in Denver, to really do exactly that, to educate our employers on the impact on their business, the impact on their employees, and how it influences their productivity and their willingness to show up every day. And I think that is a continued effort by the council and the partners that I mentioned to ensure that we continue providing that education. I think I'm glad that you asked about this particular one, because there's this quote at the bottom of the report I've got in front of me, that more than 20 million women have left the workforce in the last 3 years because of childcare access issues. We're all women in this room. We're here because this is WomenGive. That's shocking to me. And we know that women and our contribution to economic gains in our country are enormous. And so I think continuing to highlight that particular point with our employers is going to be crucial. So totally agree, and it is something that we're working on. And if anyone wants us to come talk to your bosses or your employers, I'll show up. So
Or
you
if
just
you
let
are
me
the
know.
boss.
Right, yes. The other piece of that is flexible work environments go a long way. So that's another thing that we educate employers on is, if you're allowing people to work from home, that eases their childcare burden. So that's the first one. The second one, oh gosh, hold on.
Cost breakdowns.
Thank you. We've done that. So I've actually got a pretty extensive cost modeling tool that was created by Andrew Brodsky at the state level alongside Bell Policy Center that does exactly that. I can tell you the exact cost of facility fees for all of our child care centers in Larimer County, or the cost of food, or the cost of qualifications. And those pieces of data do allow us to advocate for simplicity in the qualification process. I know that that's something the Women's Foundation has supported in legislation in the past as well, in terms of removing unnecessary barriers when it comes to becoming a licensed provider. And that continues to be a very high priority for our agency as well, in that a lot of what is in place is important for health and safety and well-being, but some of it is redundant. Some of it has to be done every 6 months, which is asinine because people don't forget in 6 months, right? So I think we continue to look for ways. We've got a whole staff that focuses on kind of just the qualifications and the process to become licensed, and how we can advocate as an agency to our state licensing, to our state legislators to simplify it so it doesn't cost as much. I think there's barriers to that, again, because safety and well-being are a priority. Did you want to add?
Yeah, Allison or Gloria, if you want to add, I think it'd be great to hear state and center perspective on that one.
Do you want me to start? Go. Okay.
So from, just quickly, there's a lot, EPIC is a great resource if you are an employer, that they do, not only really the education of employers, but also they're doing a lot of great policy work to try to figure out at the state level, how we can provide tax credits to employers who are offering childcare on site, how we can offset, fees to, the most recent example I think you could have seen in the news is that Steamboat Ski Resort just opened an on-site childcare for their employees, and they used funds from the state to establish that sort of space that they had. And so, there are some policy levers, and EPIC is doing a great job at looking at those. And I agree with Christina said, I think a lot of it is around, where you have the space to talk to other employers, to advocate in your own, in your own business where you're working for the importance of childcare, and for some of those little pieces that kind of go a long way for culture and things like that around parenting, that we know there's bigger systems level issues that need to be achieved, but I also think all of us are responsible in the day-to-day to make spaces welcoming and accepting for families. The loss of women in the workforce is going to be a huge one for our society. I think about 5 years ago, we hit a tipping point where women were achieving a higher percentage of all degrees, like from community college to medical school, than men were. And so we're going to see in the next 10, 15 years, all these women leaving the workforce, a serious brain drain from our economy. And that shouldn't be the case. We should be able to figure out and have public support for the programs that are needed to allow for women to stay in the workforce.
Thank you both. I guess for the Family Center as a provider, it is extremely expensive, as Christina just mentioned, but I guess our mission is to really raise awareness of this cost and really tell the parents, tell everybody, I'm happy to, do what I know, what to do best, but you also need to understand, the operation that I have is extremely expensive. And you just gave me a great idea, because we're going to have our Belong Open House coming up in April, and we have been trying to raise awareness around childcare. This used to be a breakfast, I think, during Deidre's times, it was a burrito breakfast or something. That everybody had a burrito, but it has changed because we're opening up the center for people to have an experience. And yes, they can donate if they want. Of course, we're going to take donations. But I think that our part is to create those relationships and raise awareness of what we're doing and why it's important. I feel that there's a lot of expectations that providers are the ones that need to solve the issue. And that is a misconception because I have an operation. I need to pay wages. I need to support the staff. I need to train. I need to take care of the teachers because they're there with the kids all day, and I wanted to take care of them with self-care, wellness programs. Any grant that I can secure is going to the teachers, well, the staff overall, but the teachers in this case. They're the ones that I want them to have what they need. I want them to feel supported. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up.
That question evoked an image in my mind of an outline of a cute little kid with all of the elements of funding kind of filling up like a thermometer when we do a fundraising campaign of what it costs. I saw two hands, one close.
What is, in your opinion, the easiest way for mothers, families to navigate the resources that are available to them? It feels like your acronyms rival the military, right? So it gets a little confusing. What's your input on that?
Well, you know, because we are a family resource center, we have a very holistic approach on how we work with our family. We never tell them what they need. They come to us and the family establishes their goals, like what do they want to work on, and then we just help them, you know, with whatever they need to connect them. Because that way, you know, the family knows what's available, they can identify their needs, and the next time they need it, they know where to go. But the one thing that really makes us, I don't want to say different or unique, is that we follow up with our families. It's just not like an information or referral thing that one time, here's the phone number. We really want to know what happens after. You know, we provide those resources and we do the follow-up with the families. So that's how we establish those relationships.
I'll just, throw in quickly sort of the need for this, like the public support piece and also my own personal experience. Like even having knowing what an early childhood council is and knowing all the acronyms, but still, having a child and trying to navigate, looking at different childcare centers, applying for them, and, having a job where I can call places and do all those things. I mean, it's, even that is so hard. So having important community resources and making sure they're supported so families can learn those things is so important. And, as it's, sort of it's an interesting space to then really advocate for this public support, like larger government programs. But, if we are starting to model more after sort of like the K-12 approach, that it will make it hopefully a little bit easier for families when they have something that they can funnel more into versus I am just looking on the different websites and then Googling and then calling, and it's and I think I'm pretty good at Googling and calling people and asking questions. But even that, I mean, it's really tough. And so I think supporting these community organizations to make sure there's that, that place that folks can go to learn and ask questions is so important right now.
Yeah, I'll just wrap that up with, I have staff that we've had probably 4 babies born in the last 3 years in my organization, and none of them have found licensed childcare when their children were infants. And you cannot be more connected to the system than working within the Early Childhood Council, right? So it continues to be a problem, and we know that. We've taken some steps to make it easier for families, mothers in particular. So we've got LarimerChildcare.org, which helps families identify where there's openings in the community so they don't have to call 75 centers and wait on hold and leave messages and try and get calls back. It's a mostly real-time system that allows providers to let us know what openings they have and families to identify them quickly. So that's a good one. Through the launch of the universal preschool system, we've worked really hard to partner with our organizations that do it really well. So our family resource centers, there's an organization called the Matthews House, there's our early intervention teams, and we've taken some significant steps to ensure that anyone that calls themselves a family navigator or an early childhood navigator in any of these systems in Larimer County know all of the things. So they know how to connect a family to Larimer Child Care Connect. They know how to get them enrolled in UPK. They know how to connect them to our Family Resource Center to make sure they're getting everything else they need. And so we're hopeful that the system becomes, over time, a little bit easier to navigate. But it's going to remain a challenge until we find a real solution.
Okay, this kind of goes a little bit back to what Gloria was saying with the previous question. But I think that we can all agree that it's like a common sentiment that the work that nonprofits do and that educators do is valuable, but then there's a disconnect in translating that to those individuals being paid the same way that for-profit employees do and also receiving the same benefits. And like, I work for a nonprofit. I'm constantly asked, like, so what do you do for your job? Like, and that's what I do. So I was just wondering, like, what your various organizations are doing to kind of like bridge that gap, or like share the knowledge that the people who work in these spaces are qualified and deserving of healthcare and a livable wage, and then also like what we can do in our various communities.
I can start just from sort of an advocacy perspective. So the Women's Foundation, along with a really important group of partners in different areas, has for many years advocated for things like paid family medical leave to be a state program, and in 2020, along with Prop EE, we as voters approved that as well. And so, we agree with you. I mean, it is really, really hard because, not only are nonprofits taking on, what traditionally a government might do, but it's also, a sector that's predominantly led by women, or, have women employees. And so we're seeing, again, another reason that women might not be earning a livable wage or having benefits or any of the pieces that might be able to support them and their families in thriving. And so there have been other policy initiatives, there's a portable retirement account that was passed a few years ago that's ready to go into effect that businesses can opt into, or employers can opt into. And different pieces that we really strongly believe in this public investment in childcare and early education, as we've talked about a lot, but trying to kind of, I'm sure I'm missing like many other things, so like the scaffolding that we all need to make sure we can be successful and safe and able to thrive. It's so many of these pieces that employers are expected to provide to their employees, but it's really hard, when you have an expectation or a bottom line to meet, and how can we have government come in and help provide that as well?
I really appreciate that question that you just made. I feel that, for what belongs to my area, of expertise, we're always looking for ways to provide more benefits, to increase those benefits for the staff. And I think the key for us as a family resource center is really finding more shared services, a shared service model that maybe we cannot compete with the wages from a corporation, not even the school district, right? How many times we have talked about they get a $60 million budget, and I cannot even raise enough money to increase wages. But I think that there's an opportunity that could still be explored. And I don't know if the new Department of Education, Early Childhood Education, could start looking into more shared services, because if we can lower those costs, then we have a little bit more money, for those salary increases. For us in the past, we have been able to increase the amount of money that we put into health insurance premiums for staff, and that has been a huge benefit. And every time we have an opportunity, we provide a bonus, maybe at the end of the year or mid-year, and a wellness program. And we also have the employee assistance program that is, available for all the staff at no cost. But I think one thing to explore is those shared services in the future.
I think that was a great question, and it also has a charge with if you are a donor, and I think, you know, even considering when we have grant applications, what would it look like if nonprofits submitted what we say we're gonna fund as an application, and then there was like a separate, or a, this is, if I were paying my staff what I think they deserve, this would be the actual ask. So my wheels are turning. Thank you all for being here, for giving your time that is precious, for the amazing questions, and most importantly, thank you to the three of you for all that you do, the great humans that you are, and sharing your time with us today. Please join me in thanking them.